My name is Emily, I'm 26 years old, and if you asked anyone who knows me, they'd probably say I've always been the type of person who trusts too easily. I like to believe the best in people, especially those closest to me. And up until recently, I thought that trust was one of my best qualities. But looking back, maybe it was also my biggest weakness. Subscribe, like, and share this story if you want to see how I discovered secret messages that shattered my world. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, betrayal drama, and powerful revenge stories, don't miss this one. I've been dating my boyfriend Daniel for almost 3 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, one of those crowded bar nights where you don't expect much of anything to happen. He was tall, charming, the kind of guy who could make anyone laugh without even trying. We ended up stuck in the corner together after I spilled half my drink, and he handed me a napkin with a smile that I'll never forget. From that night on, we were inseparable. Our relationship wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but I thought we had something solid. We moved in together after a year and a half, and while we had our ups and downs, I always felt secure in the idea that he loved me. He told me he did, constantly, and I believed him. The other important person in my life is my younger sister, Hannah. She's only 2 years younger than me, so we grew up practically glued at the hip. We shared clothes, secrets, even boy trouble. Hannah has always been a little more adventurous than me. She was the wild one sneaking out late at night in high school while I stayed in my room studying, but we balanced each other out. People often said we weren't just sisters, we were best friends. So naturally, when I started dating Daniel, I couldn't wait for Hannah to meet him. I remember the night I first introduced them. We were at a small dinner I hosted in our apartment, just the three of us, some pasta and a bottle of wine. Hannah laughed at all his jokes, and Daniel seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. I was thrilled. In my mind, it felt like my two favorite people were clicking. Over time, the three of us hung out often. Movie nights, trips to the beach in the summer, even game nights when Hannah would crash on our couch. I loved how well they got along. It made me feel like I had this perfect little circle. What could be better than your sister and your boyfriend being friends? But looking back, there were small moments that I ignored. Things that should have raised a red flag, but at the time I brushed them off as nothing. Like the time I walked into the kitchen and found them laughing together, heads close, Daniel showing her something on his phone. They jumped a little when I came in, like I had interrupted something. But when I asked what was so funny, they just said, "Oh, nothing," and changed the subject. Or the night we were all watching a movie and I noticed Hannah texting, smiling to herself. Out of curiosity, I asked who it was and she quickly said, "Just a friend." I didn't think much of it, but now I wonder if I should have. The weirdest moment was at my birthday dinner last year. Daniel leaned over to whisper something to Hannah, and she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. I asked what he said, and she just waved me off with, "It's nothing, don't worry." I remember feeling a tiny pang of jealousy, not romantic, but like I was being left out of an inside joke between them. Till I told myself I was imagining things. 'Cause why would I suspect anything? This was my boyfriend and my sister. Two people I loved and trusted the most. Betrayal was the last thing on my mind. But then came the night that changed everything. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch, his phone slipping out of his hand. Normally, I never looked at his phone. I've always believed that if you need to snoop, your relationship is already in trouble. But that night, something tugged at me. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was just curiosity. I can't really explain it. His phone buzzed with a notification. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. It was Hannah. I hesitated, staring at the glowing message preview. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe she was just asking him something about a family gathering or a Netflix password. But against my better judgment, I picked up the phone and opened the thread. And what I saw made my hands go cold. The messages weren't about family or Netflix. They weren't even platonic. They were flirty, suggestive. Messages that made my heart pound and my vision blur. Things like, "Hannah, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it." Daniel, me neither. We have to be careful though. Emily can't find out. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My own sister. My boyfriend. Two people I trusted most had been sneaking around behind my back. I remember just sitting there in silence, staring at the screen, the words burning into me. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. For a few minutes, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. But then something inside me hardened. Instead of screaming or waking Daniel up right then, I carefully put the phone back on the table and stared at him while he slept. He had no idea I knew. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them right away. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No. I was going to play along. Pretend I knew nothing. And when the time was right, I would take my revenge. I didn't know how yet. But I knew this. When I exposed them, it was going to hurt. The morning after I found those messages, I woke up before Daniel. I just lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. My heart was still pounding from the night before, but I forced myself to breathe and think clearly. I kept telling myself, don't act rashly. Don't let them know you know. That thought became my anchor. When Daniel finally stirred awake, he stretched and smiled at me like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't been sending my sister messages that made my stomach twist. He kissed my forehead, mumbled something about needing coffee, and wandered into the kitchen. I followed him, pretending to be my normal self. I even laughed at one of his lame morning jokes. But inside, my blood was boiling. Every word out of his mouth sounded fake to me now. Later that day, I called Hannah. I wanted to test her. She picked up on the second ring, cheerful as ever. Hey, what's up? She said. I tried to keep my voice steady. Not much. Just wanted to see if you wanted to grab lunch sometime this week. Sure. How about Thursday? She replied without hesitation. As we made plans, I listened carefully, waiting for any sign of guilt in her voice. But Hannah sounded so normal, so casual, like nothing was wrong. Made me sick. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, my mind racing. They were both so good at pretending. Did they really think I'd never find out? Or did they just not care if I did? Over the next week, I started paying closer attention. The little things I'd brushed off before now screamed at me. Like the way Daniel suddenly started putting a lock code on his phone, something he'd never done before. When I teased him about it, he shrugged and said, "Work emails, you know. Privacy." Or how Hannah would suddenly forget to mention where she was going at night, only to post vague selfies later smiling in restaurants or sitting in a car with no captions. One evening, when Daniel said he was working late, I noticed Hannah's car parked at a coffee shop not far from his office. I didn't confront her, but the sight made my chest tighten. I felt like a detective in my own life, collecting clues, piecing together the truth. But the hardest part was pretending. Pretending to be the clueless girlfriend, the supportive sister. Smiling when inside I was screaming. The more I watched them, the more I realized how deep their betrayal went. It wasn't just a fling. They were careful. Strategic. They had their own little world right under my nose. But if they thought I was naive, they were in for a surprise. Because the more I saw, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to just catch them, I was going to expose them in a way they'd never forget. One night, as Daniel showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart raced, but I forced myself to move slowly, casually. I picked it up and saw another message from Hannah. Hannah, can't wait for Saturday. Same place as last time. Daniel, yes. 7 p.m. I'll make up some excuse for Emily. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Saturday. A date. That was it. That was my chance. I put the phone back exactly how I found it and sat on the bed, my mind already working overtime. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to walk right into that little secret world of theirs and tear it apart. Saturday would be the night everything changed. When I marked that text, Saturday, same place as last time, I felt something cold and clear settle in me. This was no longer about anger alone, it was about timing and dignity. I had every intention of making the reveal clean, undeniable, and public enough that they couldn't spin it into misunderstanding. I wanted a moment that would leave them with nothing but the facts. The first rule I made for myself was this: no drunk confrontations, no scenes in my living room, no yelling in the hallway. I had seen enough of that in movies to know it never ends well. If I wanted to be heard, I had to be calm, composed, and precise. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the truth presented plainly, without emotion flattening its edges. And I wanted to control the narrative from the start. So I planned like a patient strategist. I rehearsed lines in my head not to be mean but to be clear. I prepared evidence in case either of them tried to deny details. I chose the place carefully, a small bistro downtown where the lights were warm, where couples usually kept their voices low, and where the staff would inevitably notice something odd if I caused a fuss. It wasn't dramatic in the cinematic sense, but it was intimate enough to work and public enough to have witnesses, exactly what I needed. First, logistics. I called the bistro under the pretense of making a reservation for a surprise anniversary dinner for two, not an unusual request. The hostess asked the time. I said, Saturday, 7 p.m. I kept the voice steady and made certain to request a table with a little distance from others but still clearly visible from the main dining room. That would ensure I could make a deliberate entrance and be seen without it seeming staged. Next, I found a photographer friend, Lena, who owed me a favor and had a certain joie de vivre for emotional truth. I told her I needed a friend who could blend in at a restaurant and, if necessary, document an awkward reunion. She laughed at the idea, thought it juicy, but agreed on one condition. She would only photograph what was visible, nothing invasive. I appreciated her restraint. I wanted proof, not revenge porn. Then came the part one feared most. The phone calls. I needed to make sure Daniel would actually go to the date. He'd become more careful since I'd first discovered the messages. He used codes and hid things, but he was still sloppy with patterns. He generally texted casually, caffeinated by the thrill of secrecy. I had to ensure this date would happen and at the time I predicted. If I simply confronted him the night he planned to cancel, I'd look foolish. So I crafted a text and sent it at noon on Friday to Daniel, written in the voice I assumed he expected. Warm, lightly flirtatious, wholly trusting. Hey love, big day, my friend from out of town is coming over tonight, I'll be out late. Don't wait up, winky face. It was a lie, my friend wasn't coming over, but I wanted him to feel comfortable that I would be away. He texted back, no problem. Have fun. I'll catch up later, smiley face. His response lulled me into the kind of calm I needed. I also sent Hannah a text, casual and sisterly. Going to a movie screening with friends tomorrow night? Want me to grab popcorn for you too? She replied with the kind of playful emoji I'd seen 1,000 times. She was convinced. They were both assuming Saturday was clear. Perfect. That evening I prepared myself. I wore something that said respectable and in control. A navy dress with a modest neckline, simple jewelry, and comfortable heels I could walk in without tripping. I wanted to look like someone who had been loved well, someone whose composure would make their betrayal more obvious. The irony was raw. I was dressing up for the people who had decided to act dishonestly when I'd given them my trust. At 6:30 p.m., Lena texted me. I'm at the bistro. Table ready. I'm in a red scarf. I felt my pulse quicken. The city hummed outside my apartment window as I took a deep breath and left. Walking toward the restaurant, I rehearsed what I would say, simple, factual lines. I would not accuse with emotive language. I would state facts, show messages if needed, and then leave the rest to the noise of other people witnessing them. When I arrived, the hostess led me to the table Lena had chosen, slightly elevated so I could see the entire dining room, near enough to the entrance that anyone coming in would be visible. Lena pretended to be a date waiting for her companion. She gave me a subtle thumbs up and settled into her role. The bistro was warm with low conversations and clinking cutlery, the perfect everyday world backdrop for a private betrayal. I sipped water and waited. My stomach felt tight, but the tightness refined my focus. Waiting had changed me. I had been furious for weeks, but this was cold focus, like a lens zeroing in on an objective. At 7:05 p.m., the bell on the bistro's door jingled. Two figures stepped in, Daniel and Hannah, the very image of casual lovers who were careful but still somehow awkward under the scrutiny of normal light. Daniel wore a jacket and a small, confident grin. Hannah's hair was loose, and she seemed slightly flushed like someone who had been primping all evening. They scanned the room as if looking for privacy and then spotted a corner table at the back, a riskier location if anyone decided to watch. They sat. I watched them settle in, the way Hannah tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she laughed at something Daniel said, the intimate lean of their shoulders. Lena discreetly took photographs, keeping a low profile while I stayed poised. For a moment, they seemed oblivious, wrapped in the kind of insular joy I had once imagined for myself and Daniel. They didn't know I knew. And that, for whatever reason, made their small flirtation feel particularly obscene. My plan had several fail-safes because I'd learned that humans improvise. If they left early or the venue was poor for visibility, I had a backup. I'd send a short text to a friend who would tag me in their own Instagram story about seeing a familiar couple in the bistro. That would ensure at least some public awareness. But a live scene was preferable, the truth unclothed, immediate, with witnesses whose memories would corroborate mine. As I waited, a strange mixture of sorrow and power washed over me. I thought about telling them right there, stomping in and slamming the screenshots on the table, but instead I allowed the moment to play out. I wanted the public but controlled reveal, enough to be undeniable, not meant to humiliate beyond the point of truth. 15 minutes later, I did something small and quiet. I texted Hannah from my phone using a group chat trick I knew she wouldn't expect. Text read, "Have a great night, sis. I miss you." Black heart, nothing accusatory. Just sisterly warmth, the kind no conspirator expects to receive while plotting deceit. I hit send and watched them feel the little sting of being watched. Hannah glanced at her phone, smoothed her expression the way someone might when they think they've dodged a small bullet. Then I stood. I walked, deliberate, hands at my sides, through the dining room toward their table. Lena stayed put, camera hidden beneath her napkin. I made it seem accidental, a woman heading to the restroom, seeing a friend across the room. I stood there for a fraction of a second right next to their table and smiled. "Hey, guys," I said, bright and unaffected. "What a surprise." They both looked up, Hannah's smile faltering first, Daniel's composure flickering into alarm. They hadn't chosen a private booth after all. They'd chosen a corner with an eye shot of every patron who could see them, and between the two of them stood me. The air shifted. Emily. Hannah sounded tiny. What are you doing here?" I shrugged, shoulders casual. "I told you, I had a movie screening." Plans changed. I thought I'd get some dinner. My voice was even. The truth is my voice was carrying now. It was a public room and my tone had the weight of ordinary confidence. Daniel pushed out a laugh that tried to be breezy and fell flat. "Oh, wow, Didn't expect to see you." He glanced at Hannah like he wanted to telepathically communicate a plan to apologize quickly, to create distance, to insist this was nothing. But he'd chosen the wrong place. I sat, of course. I sat at a table across from them like a person with the right to be there, folding a napkin slowly. "Mind if I join you?" I asked softly, though the question was rhetorical. Hannah looked like she might cry. Daniel's jaw worked. A couple at a neighboring table turned to look. The room had that low, midweek hum, people used to the world going on around them, now slightly curious about the tension being threaded across their evening. That was fine. That was exactly the witness I wanted. We exchanged pleasantries that were hollow. I let them speak first, apologies mumbled, denial shaped like broken sentences. I listened, breathing slowly. They tried to tell me it wasn't what it looked like, that they didn't mean to hurt me. I let the words slide off like rain on a coat. Then, without raising my voice, I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table to Daniel. "You should explain these," I said. On the screen was the thread he thought was private. All the messages, dated, time-stamped, the little moments of planning for tonight, his own admissions. The table went quiet enough that the cutlery sounded like a tiny army. Daniel's face drained. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, not triumphant, not theatrical. Just simple, undeniable truth. The photos Lena had taken from her seat were doing their quiet work too. A few patrons glanced and then looked away, an instinct to not intrude, but their faces held the impression. The restaurant had become a sovereign of witnesses. Daniel's voice cracked. Let me," he began. "You planned this," I said. "You lied. You told me you loved me." It was odd how calm my voice felt. The rage had not gone away, but it was organized now, directed into clarity rather than chaos. Hannah stood up, weaving a web of excuses. Loneliness, confusion, it started as a joke. Daniel tried to excuse it as an emotional lapse. But the messages were stable, patient, and clear. "I can't stop thinking about you. I'll see you Saturday, I'll be careful." I let them talk until their sentences turned thin and the staff at the bistro politely asked them if they would like some water. After a while, Hannah's composure crumbled and she began to cry. Daniel's apologies blurred into a repetition of small, empty words. I looked at them both, my sister and my boyfriend, and for the first time I felt only the emptiness their betrayal had carved. This wasn't the theatrical climax I'd imagined as a teenager. It was a small, intimate collapse under the ordinary lights of a place where people come to be fed. It was painfully real. I rose, calm as always. I reached for my bag and said, "I'm done." I left the tip on the table, generous in spite of everything, and walked out into the night. People glanced back as I passed. Some nodded in that tiny way people do when they witness one human's dignity in the face of another's shame. The next days were a blur. Messages, calls, a messy breakup that felt both final and strangely anticlimactic. Both Hannah and Daniel tried to talk to me, and I listened just enough to hear their excuses. They wanted to make amends. They wanted second chances. For a little while I entertained the idea of them making reparations, public apologies, counseling, restitution of trust. But the trust was gone, and apologies without change are a thin bandage. In the weeks that followed, I learned that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet taking back of your life, reclaiming your space, replying with the truth, letting people see what you see. The photos Lena took went into a private folder. I never posted them publicly, I didn't need to. The truth had been told, in front of witnesses who mattered. What I wanted more than anything was my life back. I wanted the ordinary small things that felt stolen. My mornings with coffee, the unguarded laughter on a Friday night, the simplicity of being loved without caveats. Took months to feel like myself again, but the wound healed. I moved apartments, changed the locks, and let new routines stitch the days together. The relationships that mattered, my friends, my family beyond Hannah, rallied quietly. I found support in small breakfasts, long walks, honest conversations. Over time, I forgave in a way that suited me, not excusing what they did, but freeing myself from the need to be consumed by it. And one evening, months later, I bumped into Hannah at our mother's kitchen table. There was distance between us. Not the kind that mends quickly, but the kind that acknowledges pain and moves forward slowly. She said she was sorry. Again. I listened, measured my responses, and did what felt right. I set boundaries, and I left the door open a crack for healing that might someday happen. Revenge had not been a spectacle. It was a clean, controlled reclaiming of narrative. I was the one who decided how the truth would be revealed. I didn't tear them down publicly beyond what was necessary to show the facts. I lived through the pain and I came out on the other side, quieter but firmer. Sometimes when I walk past that bistro, I think about the strange moral math of that night. Some would say I was petty. Some would call it justice. The truth is, it was neither. It was a step I had to take to feel like myself again. I learned that you don't need dramatics to be seen. You only need clarity, evidence, and the courage to let truth stand on its own. In the end, crashing their date was not the end of my story, it was the pivot. What followed was me rebuilding, learning the tough lesson that love and loyalty require mutual investment, and that disrespect from the people closest to you is one of life's cruelest tests. I survived it. I grew from it. And I finally, slowly trusted again, choosing new people who honored my presence instead of exploiting it.